grandfather's Winchester, but the fundamental principles remained the same. "Range to village center," Emily requested, settling behind her rifle. Webb studied the target area through his spotting scope, calculating distances and environmental factors. 780 meters to the main buildings. Wind southeast at 12 knots, temperature rising. Atmospheric conditions are stable. Through her scope, Emily watched the patrol begin their approach to Carrara. The village appeared peaceful. Children playing in dusty streets, women tending gardens, men working with livestock. It was difficult to imagine this quiet scene containing the weapons caches that intelligence reported. "Overwatch, this is Ranger 6. Lieutenant Foster's voice crackled through the radio. "Beginning search of Compound 1. Maintain eyes on. Report any suspicious movement." Emily tracked the patrol's movement through her scope, noting their professional approach to clearing buildings and their respectful interaction with villagers. The soldiers were clearly experienced in these operations, maintaining security while avoiding unnecessary intimidation of civilians. But the first indication of trouble came not through her scope, but through sounds that carried across the valley. Shouting voices, running footsteps, and the distinctive metallic sounds of weapons being prepared for action. "Movement on the eastern ridgeline," Webb reported, his voice tight with tension. "Multiple personnel with weapons, approximately 100-200 meters from our position." Emily shifted her aim toward the reported location, scanning the distant ridgeline for targets. Through her scope, she identified 5 figures moving along a path that would bring them to positions overlooking the village. "Ranger 6, this is Overwatch," Martinez transmitted. "Multiple armed personnel moving to positions that could engage your location. Recommend expediting search and preparing for possible contact." "Overwatch, Ranger 6 copies. Can you identify hostile intent?" Emily watched the figures through her scope, noting their equipment and movement patterns. They carried weapons and moved with the tactical discipline that suggested military training, but their intent remained unclear. "Negative on hostile intent confirmation," Martinez replied, "but positioning suggests preparation for engagement." And the situation escalated when Emily observed one of the figures unslinging what appeared to be a rocket-propelled grenade launcher aiming toward the village where Foster's patrol was still conducting their search. "Ranger 6, Overwatch, definite hostile intent confirmed. RPG team preparing to engage your position." "Overwatch, permission to engage." Emily's world narrowed to the precise calculations required for a 100-200 meter shot in variable wind conditions. The target was partially concealed behind rocks, presenting a difficult angle and limited exposure time. "Range, 1-200 meters, Webb confirmed. "Wind southeast at 15 knots. Temperature differential calculated. Target moving toward firing position." Emily's breathing slowed as she entered the focus state that made exceptional shooting possible. Through her scope, she watched the enemy soldier position his RPG launcher, calculating the precise moment when he would be exposed enough for an effective shot. The shot broke clean and true, the bullet covering 100-200 meters in less than 2 seconds. Emily watched through her scope as the target collapsed, his weapon tumbling down the rocky slope. "Target down," Webb confirmed. "Excellent shot, Whitaker." But the engagement was far from over. The remaining enemy fighters had identified Emily's shooting position and begun returning fire, their bullets striking rocks near her position and sending stone fragments flying. "Overwatch taking effective fire from eastern ridgeline," Martinez reported. "Ranger 6, recommend immediate extraction from village." The firefight continued for 20 minutes, with Emily engaging targets at extended range while Foster's patrol fought their way out of the village under covering fire. By the time the shooting stopped, Emily had made 3 confirmed kills at ranges between 800 and 1,200 meters, establishing herself as a formidable precision shooter in actual combat conditions. But the real test came that evening, when Emily sat alone in her quarters, processing the reality of having taken human lives for the first time. The faces of the men she'd killed remained vivid in her memory, and the weight of her actions settled on her shoulders like a physical burden. Marcus Webb found her sitting on her bunk, staring at her hands with an expression he'd never seen before. "Whitaker, you okay?" Emily looked up, her eyes reflecting the complexity of emotions that hadn't been there that morning. "I keep seeing their faces, Webb. They were trying to kill our soldiers, and I made the right tactical decisions, but they're still dead because I pulled the trigger." Webb sat down beside her, understanding that this conversation was crucial for Emily's long-term effectiveness as a soldier. "Whitaker, what you're feeling is normal. It means you understand the significance of what happened today." "Does it get easier?" Webb considered his answer carefully. "No, it doesn't get easier. But you learn to carry the weight without letting it compromise your ability to protect your fellow soldiers. The men you killed today were preparing to kill Americans. You saved lives by taking lives." "I know that intellectually," Emily said quietly, "but knowing something and feeling something are different." "They are, and the day you stop feeling the weight of these decisions is the day you should stop being a soldier." Staff Sergeant Martinez joined them, carrying 3 cups of coffee and wearing the expression of someone who'd had this conversation before with young soldiers experiencing combat for the first time. "Whitaker, I debriefed your actions with Lieutenant Foster and Major Stone. Your shooting today was exceptional, and your decisions were tactically sound." Martinez handed her a cup of coffee. "But I'm more interested in how you're processing what happened." "It's harder than I expected," Emily admitted. "Training prepares you for the technical aspects, but not for the emotional reality." "Good," Martinez said firmly. "Soldiers who aren't affected by killing either haven't fully understood what they've done, or they lack the empathy that make them effective in complex operational environments." Over the following weeks, Emily's reputation as an exceptional marksman spread throughout FOB Chapman and beyond. Intelligence officers began requesting her team for specific missions, targeting high VIV-U individuals. Infantry units specifically asked for her overwatch support during dangerous operations. Word of the 18-year-old sniper with impossible accuracy reached battalion and brigade headquarters. But with recognition came pressure and expectations that began affecting Emily's performance and relationships with fellow soldiers. "Whitaker's getting cocky," Emily overheard one soldier telling another during chow hall conversation. 3 weeks in country, and she thinks she's Annie Oakley." The comment stung because Emily knew it contained a grain of truth. Success in combat had given her confidence that occasionally crossed the line into arrogance, and she'd begun taking risks that more experienced soldiers wouldn't consider prudent. The issue came to a head during a mission to eliminate a Taliban commander who'd been coordinating attacks against supply convoys. Intelligence had located the target in a compound 8 miles from the base in terrain that offered excellent concealment but limited escape routes. "Whitaker, I want you to understand something," Martinez said during the mission briefing. "This target has survived 3 previous attempts to eliminate him. He's smart, well-trained, and surrounded by experienced fighters. Overconfidence will get you killed." "I understand, Sergeant," but her tone suggested she considered the warning unnecessary. The target compound sat in a valley surrounded by steep ridgelines, accessible by only 2 roads that were likely monitored by sentries. Emily's shooting position would be on a hilltop 500 meters from the target building, beyond the range where most snipers could operate effectively, but within Emily's demonstrated capabilities. "While on 500 meters is a challenging shot even under perfect conditions," Webb observed as they studied the terrain. "With the wind patterns, that valley, it's going to require precise calculations and perfect timing. I can make the shot," Emily said with the confidence that had begun to concern her teammates. Whitaker Martinez interjected. "The question isn't whether you can make the shot. The question is whether you should attempt it. If you miss, or if the shot doesn't immediately neutralize the target, we'll be in a firefight with superior numbers on terrain that favors the enemy." Emily studied the mission parameters one more time, calculating distances, wind factors, and target vulnerability. The shot was at the extreme edge of her abilities, but she believed it was achievable with proper preparation and execution. Sergeant, I recommend we proceed with the mission. I can neutralize the target with a single shot if conditions are optimal. The approach to the shooting position required 6 hours of movement through mountainous terrain, traveling only during darkness to avoid detection. Emily's team moved with the deliberate precision that characterized special operations, each soldier understanding that mistakes in enemy territory could prove fatal. Emily established her shooting position well before dawn, arranging her equipment and calculating environmental factors, while Webb coordinated with surveillance assets monitoring the target compound. The Taliban commander was scheduled to meet with other leaders at sunrise, a meeting that would present a brief window for engagement. Target compound under observation, Webb reported through his spotting scope. Multiple personnel moving around the buildings, but no positive identification of primary target. Emily settled behind her rifle, beginning the mental preparation that preceded challenging shots. At 1,500 meters, she would be operating at the absolute limits of her equipment's capabilities and her own skills. Wind conditions in the valley were variable, with thermal currents creating unpredictable patterns that could affect bullet trajectory. Whitaker de Martinez's voice carried a warning tone. If you are not completely confident in the shot, we abort and try again under better conditions. Through her scope, Emily watched figures moving around the target compound, waiting for the specific individual whose elimination was their mission objective. The technical challenges of the shot occupied most of her attention, but she also found herself thinking about the broader implications of what she was preparing to do. Primary target identified, Webb announced. Taliban commander exiting the main building, moving toward the courtyard. Emily's crosshairs found the target, tracking his movement while calculating the precise moment when conditions would be optimal for engagement. The man in her scope was perhaps 40 years old, moving with the confidence of someone accustomed to command and authority. Range 150 meters, Webb confirmed. 1 southeast at 18 knots, gusting to 25. Temperature stable. Emily's breathing slowed as she entered the focus state that made extreme range shooting possible. The target moved into the courtyard, pausing to speak with other men who had gathered for the scheduled meeting. The shot opportunity presented itself suddenly. The target standing alone in clear sight, wind conditions temporarily stable, and optimal lighting for target identification. Emily's finger found the trigger, her world narrowing to the precise calculations required for success. The shot broke clean, the bullet covering 1,500 meters in approximately 2 seconds. Through her scope, Emily watched the target collapse, confirming successful engagement of the primary objective. "Target down," Webb reported. "Excellent shot, Whitaker." But their celebration was premature. The compound erupted with activity as fighters scattered for cover and began searching for the source of the shot. Emily's muzzle flash had been partially concealed, but experienced fighters could estimate her general location based on bullet trajectory and timing. "Multiple personnel moving toward our position," Martinez observed through his binoculars. "Estimate 20 to 30 fighters beginning systematic search of surrounding ridgelines." Emily began packing her equipment with practiced efficiency, understanding that their shooting position would be compromised within minutes. The successful elimination of their target had triggered a response that would require immediate extraction. "Overwatch, this is Eagle 6. The radio crackled with the voice of their extraction helicopter pilot. "Weather conditions deteriorating rapidly, visibility dropping below safe limits for mountain flying." Emily felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. If weather prevented helicopter extraction, her team would be forced to evade on foot through terrain controlled by enemy forces who now knew approximately where they were located. "Martinez, we need to move now," Emily said, shouldering her pack and checking her equipment one final time. "Agreed. Webb, take point. Whitaker, you're in the middle. I'll bring up the rear and cover our extraction route. The movement to their alternate extraction point required descending through terrain that offered minimal concealment, while potentially hostile forces searched the surrounding area. Emily found herself in the unfamiliar position of being pursued rather than pursuing, relying on fieldcraft skills she'd learned in training but never applied under genuine pressure. 2 hours into their movement, Webb signaled for them to halt and take cover behind a formation of large rocks. In the distance, they could hear voices and the sounds of vehicles moving along the valley floor. "Local forces conducting search operations," Martinez whispered. "They're being systematic about it, which means they have experienced leadership." Emily studied the terrain ahead, noting potential routes and obstacles while calculating how long their concealment might remain effective. The hunters had become the hunted, and she was learning that survival required different skills than marksmanship. Whitaker Martinez continued quietly. "How are you holding up?" "Fine, Sergeant, ready to continue movement when conditions permit." But privately, Emily was discovering that combat involved complexities she hadn't fully appreciated during training. The extraction helicopter finally arrived as weather conditions temporarily improved in allowing the crew to navigate the mountain terrain safely. As Emily climbed aboard the aircraft, she reflected on the mission's success and the lessons learned about operating in an environment where mistakes could prove fatal. Whitaker, Major Stone debriefed her team upon their return to the base. "Your shot today eliminated a high-value target who was directly responsible for American casualties. Exceptional work under challenging conditions." "Thank you, ma'am," Emily replied, though she found the praise less satisfying than she had expected. That evening, as she cleaned her rifle and recorded details about the mission in her personal journal, Emily realized that combat had revealed aspects of herself she was still learning to understand. The technical skills that had always come naturally remained intact, but the emotional and psychological demands of warfare required ongoing development. Marcus Webb found her in the common area reviewing ballistic tables and environmental data from the day's mission. "Whitaker, you have been quieter than usual since we got back. Everything okay?" Emily looked up from her calculations, considering how to articulate the complex feelings that had emerged during her first month of combat operations. "Webb, do you ever wonder if we're making a difference here? I mean, we eliminate one Taliban commander and 3 more take his place. We clear one village of weapons caches and they establish new ones somewhere else." Webb sat down across from her, recognizing the questions that eventually occurred to most soldiers deployed in complex, long-term conflicts. "Whitaker, I think about that all the time. But I also think about Lieutenant Foster's patrol and how many of those soldiers are alive today because you made impossible shots when they needed you most." Individual actions versus strategic outcomes, smused. Exactly. We can't control the strategic outcomes, but we can excel at our individual responsibilities. Your job is to be the best sniper possible. Policymakers and generals worry about the bigger picture. Emily nodded slowly, understanding that Webb was articulating a philosophy that would be essential for long-term effectiveness in military service. Makes sense. I just want to make sure that everything we're risking and sacrificing is serving a purpose worth the cost. Whitaker, the fact that you're asking these questions suggests you're developing the wisdom that makes someone not just a good soldier, but a good leader. 3 months into her deployment, Emily Whitaker had established herself as one of the most effective snipers in the Coast Province, with 17 confirmed kills at ranges that defied conventional military doctrine. Her reputation had spread beyond FOB Chapman to brigade headquarters and special operations commands throughout Afghanistan, bringing both opportunities and complications she hadn't anticipated. "Whitaker, report to the TOC immediately," Staff Sergeant Marine announced, finding Emily in the armory, where she spent most of her free time maintaining equipment and studying ballistic tables. Major Stone wants to see the team for a special briefing. The Tactical Operations Center buzzed with unusual activity for a Tuesday afternoon. Computer workstations displayed satellite imagery and communication intercepts, while several officers Emily didn't recognize studied maps and discussed operational details in hushed tones. Whitaker, Webb, Martinez. Major Stone called them over to a secured briefing area. I want you to meet Colonel Sarah Hayes from Joint Special Operations Command. Colonel Hayes was perhaps 45 years old, with a kind of understated competence that marks successful special operations officers. Her uniform bore paratrooper wings, a special forces tab, and combat patches. Emily immediately recognized the name. This was the same Colonel Hayes who had briefed her about the Artemis program at Fort Benning. Hayes nodded slightly to Emily, a barely perceptible acknowledgement of their previous meeting, before addressing the team. We have a high-value target opportunity that requires your specific skills. Intelligence has confirmed the location of Abdul Rahman, the mastermind behind 17 bombing attacks across 3 countries. Hayes activated a wall-mounted display showing satellite imagery of a mountainous area. Rahman is currently in this compound approximately 50 kilometers from FOB Chapman, near the Pakistan border. He's believed to be coordinating a major weapons exchange between 3 terrorist cells. Martinez studied the imagery with a professional eye. Difficult approach terrain, limited access routes, heavy security presence. Correct. Conventional assault would be detected well before reaching the objective. Airstrike risks significant collateral damage and wouldn't guarantee elimination of the primary target. Hayes turned to Emily. That's why we're considering a precision long-range engagement option. How long-range are we talking? Martinez asked. Hayes highlighted distances on the map. The only viable shooting position with clear line of sight to the target area is here, on this ridgeline. Range to target? 4,800 meters. A tense silence fell over the room. Nearly 3 miles of distance that exceeded the maximum effective range of any sniper system in military inventory by a factor of 2. With respect, Colonel, Martinez said carefully, that's beyond the capabilities of our equipment and personnel. Maximum effective range of the 338 Lapua is around 1,900 meters. You're talking about more than double that. Colonel Hayes' gaze settled on Emily. Specialist Whitaker, what do you think? Emily felt every eye in the room on her. She studied the imagery, calculating angles, elevations, and environmental factors. The shot would be at the extreme edge of theoretical possibility. Ma'am, wind conditions in that valley would be complex. Temperature differential between the ridgeline and the target area would significantly affect trajectory. And that's assuming optimal atmospheric conditions and a stationary target. So you're saying it's impossible? Hayes pressed. Emily hesitated. The rational part of her mind agreed with Martinez. The shot exceeded the limits of current ballistic science and equipment technology. But another part of her, the part that seemed to understand trajectories and environmental effects at an intuitive level, wasn't so certain. I'm saying it would require exceptional conditions and unconventional calculations. Hayes nodded as if Emily had confirmed something she already suspected. Your grandfather made a shot at 1,750 yards in 1940 with World War II-era equipment, a shot that ballistic science of the time said was impossible. We believe you might be capable of exceeding even that achievement. Emily felt a chill run through her. Hayes was openly referencing the classified Artemis program in front of Martinez and Webb, who exchanged confused glances. Colonel, what exactly are you asking of my team? Martinez questioned. We're asking you to attempt what no military sniper in history has achieved, a confirmed kill at nearly 3 miles. Hayes' voice was matter-of-fact. Intelligence indicates Rahman will be at this location for the next 72 hours. After that, he'll likely disappear across the border into Pakistan, potentially for months or years. Emily studied the satellite imagery again, her mind already calculating variables and potential solutions. The rational part of her brain said the shot was impossible, but something deeper, Something connected to the genetic anomaly that had been passed down from her grandfather whispered that under perfect conditions, with precise calculations and flawless execution, it might just be achievable. "We'll need time to plan and prepare," Emily said finally, "and we'll need the most advanced equipment available." Hayes nodded. "You'll have whatever you need. A supply drop with specialized equipment will arrive tonight. You deploy tomorrow at 0400 hours. After the briefing, Martinez pulled Emily aside, his expression troubled. "Whitaker, what was that about your grandfather, and why does a full-bird colonel from JSOC know about a shot he made in World War II? Emily realized she would need to share at least some of the truth with her team leader. "My grandfather was part of a specialized marksmanship program during the war. He set records that remained classified for decades. Colonel Hayes believes I might have inherited some of his abilities." "And have you—" Martinez's gaze was penetrating. Emily met his eyes steadily. "I see things differently than most shooters. Trajectories, wind effects, environmental variables, they make sense to me in ways I can't fully explain. It's been that way since I first picked up a rifle." Martinez considered this for a long moment. "Whitaker, I trust your abilities. You've proven yourself in combat. But 4,800 meters, that's not just pushing the envelope, that's ripping it to shreds. If you miss, we'll be in hostile territory with no easy extraction. I understand the risk, Sergeant, do you? Because this isn't just about making an impossible shot. It's about the safety of our team and the strategic value of the target. If you have any doubts, any at all, I need to hear them now." Emily thought carefully before responding. "I believe the shot is theoretically possible under optimal conditions. Whether those conditions will exist during our mission window is impossible to predict. But if they do, and if we have the right equipment, I'm willing to try." Martinez nodded slowly. "All right, let's review the intelligence and start planning. Webb needs to be brought into this conversation as well. If we're going to attempt the impossible, we'll need the entire team operating at peak performance." That night, as promised, a helicopter delivered specialized equipment for the mission. The centerpiece was a custom-built 338 Lapua Magnum rifle with an advanced barrel, stock, and trigger system unlike anything Emily had ever handled. Accompanying it was a state-of-the-art scope with enhanced magnification and precision adjustment capabilities. Emily spent hours familiarizing herself with the new weapon, memorizing its feel and response characteristics. "Calculated solutions for wind speeds from 5 to 35 knots and temperature ranges from 10 to plus 40 C, Webb explained, showing Emily his meticulously prepared data sheets. "But at 4,800 meters, even minor miscalculations become significant errors." "What about Coriolis effect and spin drift?" Emily asked. "Factored in along with the light refraction variables and air density changes at different elevations." Webb shook his head in wonder. "The math on this is beyond anything we covered in training. At this distance, we're dealing with bullet flight times of nearly 7 seconds. The target could literally move out of the way between trigger pull and impact." "Then we'll need to anticipate movement and adjust accordingly," Emily replied, her mind already processing the variables. Martinez joined them, carrying tactical maps and approach plans. "Insertion will be by helicopter to a landing zone 15 kilometers from our shooting position. We'll move overland during darkness, establish our hide before dawn, and wait for the target to appear. If conditions aren't optimal, we abort and extract. No heroics, no unnecessary risks." Emily nodded her agreement, but inside she felt a growing certainty that this mission represented the culmination of everything that had brought her to this moment. Her grandfather's legacy, her own unique abilities, and the months of training and combat experience that had honed her skills. This was why she had been deployed to Afghanistan. This was why the Artemis program had monitored her family for generations. This was her destiny. As she prepared her equipment for the mission, Emily's hand touched the brass compass in her pocket, her grandfather's compass, with its inscription, "True aim comes from the heart, not just the eye." For the first time since arriving in Afghanistan, she felt a profound connection to the man who had taught her to shoot, who had passed down not just skills and knowledge, but perhaps something far more significant in her very genes. "I hope you're watching, Grandpa," she whispered. "Tomorrow we find out just how far this gift of yours can reach." The night air bit at Emily's face as she crouched beside Webb at the edge of the landing zone, waiting for the faint thump of helicopter blades that would signal the beginning of their mission. The moonless Afghan sky stretched above them, a canvas of stars more brilliant than anything she'd seen in Montana. Somewhere out there, across miles of hostile territory, Abdul Rahman was preparing for his weapons exchange, unaware that his name was on a kill list that had reached the highest levels of American military command. "Nervous?" Webb asked, his voice barely audible over the soft mountain wind. Emily touched the compass in her pocket, her grandfather's compass, feeling its weathered brass beneath her fingertips. "Not nervous," she replied. "Focused." But that wasn't entirely true. Behind her calm exterior, Emily's mind raced with conflicting emotions: pride at being chosen for this mission, apprehension about the near-impossible shot awaiting her, and a deeper, more unsettling question that had been growing since Colonel Hayes's briefing. Was she here because of her own merit, or because of a genetic quirk inherited from a grandfather she barely knew? The distant thrum of rotor blades interrupted her thoughts. The helicopter materialized from the darkness, a black shape against the starlit sky, setting down just long enough for Emily, Webb, and Martinez to board before lifting off again. No lights, no radio chatter, just the precision movement of a well-executed special operations insertion. 15 minutes to drop point, the pilot's voice crackled through their headsets. Weather conditions holding stable, winds at 10 knots from the southeast. Martinez leaned forward. "Equipment check one last time." Emily patted each component of her gear: rifle secured in its case, rangefinder, ammunition, communication equipment, survival essentials. The specialized .338 Lapa Magnum they had received for this mission weighed heavily across her back, its presence a constant reminder of what lay ahead. As the helicopter banked toward their landing zone, Emily's mind drifted back to the Montana mountains, to her family's ranch, to the first time her grandfather had placed a rifle in her small hands. She'd been 8 years old, standing in the field behind their house, uncertain and eager. "Take your time, Emily," Richard Whitaker had said, his voice gentle but firm. "A rush shot is a missed shot. Feel the weapon, become part of you, understand what it wants to do." She'd thought it strange phrasing at the time, that a rifle could want anything. But as she'd grown older, as her marksmanship had developed from hobby to gift to professional skill, she'd come to understand what he meant. Every weapon had its own personality, its own harmonics, its own way of translating the shooter's intent into action. The best marksmen didn't fight those tendencies. They learned them, respected them, worked with them. The helicopter settled into a small clearing, rotors still turning as the team disembarked. The pilot gave a thumbs up and lifted off immediately, leaving them in sudden silence, broken only by the fading sound of the departing aircraft. 15K to drop point, Martinez whispered, checking his GPS. Terrain is steep, mostly rocky, with sparse vegetation. 4 hours of hush-mudge, time if we maintain good pace. "And if we encounter opposition," Webb asked. "We abort," Martinez replied firmly. "This mission has a single objective: put Whitaker in position for the shot. Anything that compromises that objective is unacceptable risk." They moved through the darkness with the practiced efficiency of soldiers who understood that survival depended on discipline. Martinez took point, his experience guiding them through terrain that might have seemed impassable to less trained observers. Webb followed, constantly scanning their surroundings with night vision equipment, alert for any sign of enemy movement. Emily brought up the rear. The specialized .338 Lapa Magnum they had received for this mission weighed heavily across her back, its presence a constant reminder of what lay ahead. 2 hours into their movement, Martinez signaled for a halt. Ahead, the narrow path they had been following opened onto a wider valley. Even in the darkness, they could make out the dim lights of a small settlement. "Not on the map," Martinez muttered, studying the unexpected village through his night vision goggles. "Recent establishment or deliberately unmarked, Pashtun structures," Webb observed. "Probably a farming community, non-combatants." Martinez nodded. "We go around. Add 40 minutes to movement time." As they carefully circumnavigated the sleeping village, Emily found herself wondering about the lives of the people inside those simple stone houses. Farmers, families, people trying to survive in a land torn by decades of war. Did they support the Taliban? Did they hate Americans? Or were they simply caught in the middle, trying to protect their children in a world where violence had become routine? Her grandfather had written about similar thoughts in his journal. Reflections on French villagers he'd seen during the liberation of Europe, people who had endured Nazi occupation and emerged with a weariness that transcended language barriers. "The eyes of civilians in war zones all carry the same question," he'd written. "Are you here to help us or hurt us?" And they've learned the hard way that the uniform doesn't always answer that question honestly. By the time they reached the base of the ridgeline that would serve as their shooting position, the eastern sky had begun to lighten. Dawn was approaching, the deadline for establishing their hide before daylight exposed them to potential observation. "Last push," Martinez whispered. 800 meters, mostly vertical. Watch your footing and noise discipline." The climb was grueling, especially with their equipment load. Emily felt each additional ounce of the specialized rifle as they ascended the steep terrain. Loose rocks threatened to give way underfoot. Sparse vegetation offered minimal hand-holdings, but years of hiking Montana's mountains had prepared her well, and she maintained a steady pace despite the challenging conditions. Maintaining concealment. Webb began unpacking his spotting equipment, preparing for the complex calculations that would support Emily's shot. Emily found herself drawn to the edge of the ridgeline, where she could look out over the vast expanse they had crossed during the night. In the growing light, Afghanistan revealed itself in stark beauty: jagged mountains, deep valleys, and the scattered evidence of human habitation that had persisted through centuries of conflict. She could see the village they had bypassed, smoke now rising from cooking fires as the community awakened to a new day. And far in the distance, nearly 3 miles away, she could just make out the compound where Abdul Rahman was reportedly meeting with his terrorist network. At this range, it appeared as little more than a collection of beige structures against the brown landscape, almost indistinguishable from its surroundings. 3 miles, she whispered to herself. The magnitude of the task ahead, suddenly very real. 800 meters. Webb joined her at the ridgeline, setting up his spotting scope on its carbon fiber tripod. "I've never even attempted calculations for this distance," he admitted, his voice carrying a note of awe. "We're in uncharted territory, Whitaker." "Not entirely uncharted," Emily replied, thinking of her grandfather and whatever classified operations he might have conducted during and after World War II. Had he ever attempted something this ambitious? Had the Artemis program pushed the boundaries of marksmanship this far before Martinez approached to having completed his security sweep? "Hide is established. We have clear observation of the target compound and multiple escape routes if extraction becomes necessary." He knelt beside them, studying the distant compound through his binoculars. "Webb, begin environmental assessment. Whitaker, prepare your position and equipment. We have approximately 90 minutes before the target window opens." Emily nodded and moved to a flat section of the ridgeline that offered both stability for shooting and concealment from observation. She unpacked the specialized rifle with methodical care, assembling the weapon with movements that had become second nature through thousands of repetitions. The custom .338 Lapua Magnum was a masterpiece of engineering: carbon fiber stock, match-grade barrel, precision trigger assembly and an advanced scope that represented the cutting edge of optical technology. As she worked, Emily thought about Abdul Rahman, the man she had been sent to kill. 17 bombing attacks across 3 countries, hundreds of civilian casualties, coordination with multiple terrorist networks. The intelligence briefing had painted him as a monster, a man whose elimination would save countless lives. Was he truly evil, or was he like so many others in this complex conflict, fighting for what he believed was right? "Does it matter?" her grandfather had written in his journal after killing the Nazi officer. "In war, we rarely have the luxury of knowing the hearts of those we're ordered to kill. We trust that those making the decisions have weighed the morality. Our job is to execute with precision and humanity. As paradoxical as that sounds, a clean kill is its own form of respect." Emily settled behind her rifle, adjusting her position for maximum stability and comfort. The weapon needed to become an extension of her body for the shot ahead. Any tension, any misalignment would translate to error at the target end. She controlled her breathing, feeling her heart rate slow as she entered the focused state that made exceptional marksmanship possible. "Whitaker," Webb called from his spotting position. "I'm getting initial environmental readings. Wind at our position is 12 knots from the southeast. Temperature 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Barometric pressure 26.8 inches and stable." Emily made mental notes of these values, but she knew they were just the beginning. At nearly 3 miles, the bullet would pass through multiple wind zones, temperature gradients, and pressure systems. Its trajectory would be affected by the Coriolis effect, the rotation of the Earth itself. The curvature of the planet would come into play. Subtle variations in air density between the ridgeline and the valley would alter the bullet's path in ways that no existing ballistic calculator could fully predict. "Martinez, I need higher ground," Emily said suddenly, studying the ridgeline. "There's a formation about 50 meters up that would give me better angle and elevation, less interference from thermal currents in the valley." Martinez frowned. "That position would be more exposed." "I know, but at this distance the improved shooting conditions outweigh the increased vulnerability." Emily met his gaze steadily. "This isn't a standard shot, Sergeant. We need every advantage we can get." After a moment's consideration, Martinez nodded. "Webb, maintain position here and establish communication relay. Whitaker and I will move to the higher position." The formation Emily had identified was a jutting rock outcrop that provided a commanding view of the valley below. It offered a stable shooting platform and reduced the effect of heat mirage that would distort her scope picture as the day warmed. The trade-off was exposure. They would be more visible against the skyline, with fewer options for cover if detected. As Emily re-established her shooting position on the higher ground, Webb's voice came through their communication equipment. "Target compound showing activity, multiple personnel moving in the courtyard, vehicles arriving from the southeast approach road." Emily peered through her scope, adjusting the magnification to bring the distant compound into focus. At nearly 3 miles, even with the advanced optics, individual figures appeared tiny. She could make out movement, but couldn't yet distinguish specific individuals or identify weapons. "Webb, talk to me about wind conditions between here and the target," Martinez requested. "Complex," Webb replied. "I'm seeing dust movement indicating at least 3 distinct wind zones. Near ridge is 12 knots southeast. Mid-valley showing lateral movement west to east at approximately 18 knots. Target area appears calmer, maybe 8 knots, but shifting direction frequently." Emily absorbed this information, visualizing the invisible currents that would influence her bullet's flight. The mid-valley winds would create the greatest deflection. 10 knots pushing laterally across the bullet path would move the point of impact significantly at this distance. She began making preliminary adjustments to her scope, dialing in elevation to account for the extreme bullet drop over 3 miles. "Whitaker, what's your confidence level?" Martinez asked quietly. Emily continued working with her scope adjustments. "Under perfect conditions, with a stationary target and stable weather, I'd give it maybe a 30% chance of success. With variable winds and a moving target," she left the sentence unfinished. "So we're talking about a shot that's more likely to miss than hit, even for you?" "Yes, but more likely to miss isn't the same as impossible." Emily looked up from her scope. "My grandfather's journal mentions something he called the moment of convergence, when all variables briefly align to create a perfect shooting solution. If such a moment occurs, I can make this shot." Martinez studied her face, searching for any sign of doubt or overconfidence. Finding neither, he nodded. "Then we wait for your moment of convergence." The next 2 hours passed in intense observation. Through her scope, Emily watched the compound's activity increase. More vehicles arrived. Armed men established security positions. A makeshift market appeared to be forming in the courtyard. The weapons exchange, described in the intelligence briefing, was taking shape. Still, no positive identification of Rahman. Webb reported multiple high-value targets visible, but primary objective remains unconfirmed. Question of the Artemis factor. Whatever genetic gift allowed her to process visual information differently, to understand trajectories intuitively. Emily had never fully trusted this ability, preferring to rely on proven ballistic science, but at this distance, with so many variables beyond calculation, perhaps intuition was as valuable as mathematics. Movement at the main building entrance. Webb's voice crackled through the communication system. "SUV are arriving. 405 security personnel exiting first. Establishing perimeter." "Wait," his voice sharpened. "Positive identification. Rahman has exited the building. Repeat. Primary target confirmed in the courtyard." Emily's focus narrowed instantly. Through her scope, she found the figure identified as Rahman. A tall man in traditional clothing, moving with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to authority. He was greeting other men, gesturing toward the vehicles where the weapons were presumably being displayed. "Range to target?" Emily asked, her voice calm despite the surge of adrenaline. 4782 meters, Webb replied. "Wind conditions holding as previously reported. Target is moving but staying within a 10-meter area in the central courtyard." Emily made final adjustments to her scope, accounting for the specific position of the target. Martinez requesting permission to engage when conditions permit. There was a brief pause before Martinez responded. "Permission granted. Take the shot when you have it." Emily settled into her final shooting position, establishing the bone-on-bone support that would minimize movement during trigger press. Her breathing slowed to the practiced rhythm of an experienced marksman. Steady inhale, partial, exhale, hold. Through her scope, she watched Rahman moving among his associates, occasionally stopping to examine weapons being displayed from the vehicles. Each time he stopped, Emily assessed the conditions, evaluating whether the moment was right. Each time, some variable was wrong. A gust of wind, Rahman's movement, figures crossing her line of sight. "Weather shifting," Webb warned. "Barometric pressure dropping slightly. Potential weather front moving in from the west." Emily noted the information, but remained focused on her scope picture. The crosshairs held steadily on the area where Rahman was moving, her mind calculating lead and elevation adjustments for when the moment came. And then, unexpectedly, her thoughts turned to Montana, to the winter mornings when her grandfather had taken her to the ridge behind their ranch, teaching her to read the wind by watching snow blow across the valley, to the patient hours spent discussing trajectory and bullet behavior, to his hand steadying her shoulder as she took her first long-range shots. "You'll know when it's right, Emily," he told her once. "There's a moment when everything aligns. Not just the scope and the target, but something inside you. Trust that moment." In her scope, Rahman stopped walking. He stood alone in the center of the courtyard, gesturing as he spoke to a group of men. The wind across the valley had momentarily steadied. The air between the ridgeline and the compound seemed to clear, the heat mirage settling. Emily felt it then, the moment of convergence her grandfather had described. Not just the physical conditions, but a clarity of purpose and action that transcended conscious calculation. Her finger took up the trigger slack. She exhaled partially and held. The rifle fired, its report echoing across the valley as the .338 Lapu Magnum round began its long journey toward the target. 1 second passed. 2 seconds. 3. Emily held her position, maintaining sight picture through the scope, watching for impact. At this distance, she would see the target react before she heard the bullet arrive. 4 seconds. 5. 6. Through her scope, Emily saw Rahman suddenly stagger. He remained standing for a moment, then collapsed. The figures around him scattered, some taking cover, others rushing to his side. "Target down," Webb confirmed, his voice tight with disbelief. "Direct hit center mass. Rahman is neutralized." "Confirmed," Martinez added. "Whitaker, you just made a shot that rewrites every manual on military marksmanship." Emily remained in position, her eyes stilled to the scope, watching the chaos unfolding in the distant compound. She felt strangely detached, as if the shot had been fired by someone else. The enormity of what she had just accomplished hadn't yet registered. "We need to move," Martinez said urgently. "They'll be looking for the shooter. Pack up, 5 minutes to extraction point." As Emily disassembled her rifle with practiced efficiency, the reality began to sink in. She had just made a confirmed kill at nearly 3 miles of distance that defied conventional ballistic science, a distance that no military sniper in history had achieved, a distance that would have been dismissed as impossible by every marksmanship expert in the world, except perhaps for the shadowy figures behind the Artemis program, who had monitored her family for generations, waiting for the genetic anomaly to reappear. "Webb, status on enemy response," Martinez asked as they moved rapidly down the ridgeline toward their extraction point. "Significant movement in the compound. Vehicles departing in multiple directions. No coordinated search pattern yet, but they'll figure out the shot direction soon." They descended the steep terrain quickly, using controlled slides where possible to make up time. Emily's mind raced ahead to their extraction plan. A helicopter pickup at a designated location 3 kilometers from the base of the ridge. If they maintained their current pace, they would reach the extraction point with minimal margin for error. As they approached the valley floor, the sound of vehicles echoed from the direction of the village they had bypassed during their approach. "Contact possible," Martinez warned. 2 vehicles moving along the main road, likely responding to radio reports of the shot. They took cover in a dry stream bed, concealing themselves among the rocks as the vehicles passed less than 100 meters away. Emily could see armed men scanning the terrain, their faces tight with anger and purpose. The death of Rahman had mobilized every fighter in the region. When the immediate threat had passed, they continued their movement toward the extraction point, maintaining cover whenever possible, and moving with the careful haste of soldiers who understood that speed and caution were equally important to survival. 5 minutes to extraction point, Martinez announced as they entered a narrow ravine that would provide their final approach. "Helicopter is inbound, ETA 8 minutes. They had almost reached the extraction point when Webb suddenly raised his fist to signal to halt. Ahead, barely visible among the rocks, were 3 armed figures establishing an ambush position overlooking the planned landing zone. "They've anticipated our extraction," Martinez whispered. "Must have monitored our flight patterns from previous operations." Emily assessed the situation with the calm clarity that had served her throughout the mission. "We need to clear that position before the helicopter arrives, or they'll target it during landing." Martinez nodded grimly. "Webb, circle left and establish overwatch. Whitaker with me. We'll approach from the right. On my signal, may I take them simultaneously. Clean, quiet, and fast. Emily drew her sidearm, a weapon she had trained with extensively but had never used in combat. Her specialty was long-range engagement. This close-quarters work was outside her primary skill set. But the basic principles remain the same: sight alignment, breathing control, triggered discipline. Martinez held up 3 fingers, then 2, then 1. On his signal, Emily moved forward with him, approaching the enemy position from the flank, while Webb covered them from higher ground. The engagement was brief and decisive. 3 shots, 1 from Webb's position and 2 from Martinez, neutralized the threat before the enemy fighters could respond. Emily hadn't needed to fire, but she had been ready, her sidearm steady in her hands. "Clear," Martinez confirmed after checking the enemy positions. "No radio on them. They weren't able to call in our position." The distinctive sound of helicopter rotors grew audible in the distance. Their extraction was approaching. They moved quickly to prepare the landing zone, establishing security and popping smoke to mark their position. As the helicopter settled onto the rocky ground, dust swirling around them, Emily felt the tension that had sustained her begin to fade. They had accomplished their mission. Ramon was eliminated. They were going home. The flight back to Phoebe Chapman passed in exhausted silence. Emily stared out the window at the Afghan landscape passing below, trying to process what she had achieved. The shot she had made would never appear in official records. It would never be acknowledged by military authorities. It would become, at best, a whispered legend among special operations communities, just like her grandfather's 1,750-yard shot in World War II. Just like, perhaps, the achievements of other Artemis program participants whose names and accomplishments remain classified decades after their missions. Upon landing at Chapman, they were immediately escorted to a secure debriefing room, where Colonel Hayes awaited them. Her expression was unreadable as they entered, but her eyes fixed on Emily with intensity. "Preliminary intelligence confirms Abdul Rahman has been eliminated," Hayes began, without preamble. 3 of his top lieutenants were also killed in the ensuing chaos as his security forces turned on each other, suspecting betrayal from within. Martinez and Webb exchanged glances at this unexpected news. "The shot was successful then," Martinez said. "The shot," Hayes replied, "was historically significant. 4,782 meters, nearly 3 miles. It exceeds the previous confirmed record by over 2,000 meters." She turned to Emily. "Specialist Whitaker, you've accomplished something that ballistic science considered impossible." Emily met the colonel's gaze steadily. "With respect, ma'am, the shot succeeded because of ideal conditions, specialized equipment, and extensive team support. Sergeant Martinez and Webb were essential to the mission's success." Hayes nodded slightly, acknowledging the point. "Of course, which is why all 3 of you will receive commendations, classified commendations that will never appear in your official records." She paused. "The details of this operation, including the range of the engagement, are classified at the highest level. You will not discuss them with anyone, including other special operations personnel." "Just like my grandfather's shot," Emily said quietly. Hayes's expression softened slightly. "Yes, just like that. Some achievements remain hidden because they're too disruptive to conventional understanding." She stood. "You'll be debriefed individually. After that, take 48 hours for rest and recovery. You've earned it." As Hayes left the room, Martinez turned to Emily. "Whitaker, what you did today? I've been in the military for 15 years, and I've never seen anything like it. Whatever's in your DNA, whatever's in your training, it's something special." "It's not just DNA," Emily replied, thinking of the years spent with her grandfather, learning to read wind and calculate trajectories. "It's everything that came before. everything that made me who I am. Webb nodded. I believe that. But I also believe I just witnessed something I'll never see again in my lifetime. 3 miles, Whitaker. 3 miles. The individual debriefings were exhaustive, with intelligence officers asking detailed questions about every aspect of the mission. Emily described the shot in technical terms: wind conditions, elevation adjustments, hold calculations. But she couldn't fully explain the moment of convergence, the intuitive certainty that had guided her trigger press. Some things transcended technical language. After the debriefing, Emily found a quiet corner of the base where she could call her family. Hearing her parents' voices brought a rush of emotions she hadn't expected. The distance between Montana and Afghanistan suddenly felt immense, not just in miles, but in experience. You sound different, Emily, her mother observed. Are you okay? I'm fine, Mom, just tired. It's been a long week. The ranch is doing better, her father reported. The bank restructured our loan as promised. Danny's been helping with the repairs to the north fence line. Things are looking up. Emily smiled, picturing the familiar scenes of ranch life. Her father on the tractor, her mother in the garden, Danny working the fence lines. The world she had left behind seemed both precious and somehow distant, as if belonging to another lifetime. I miss you all, she said simply. We miss you too, sweetheart, her mother replied. Come home safe to us. After the call, Emily walked to the edge of the base where the perimeter fence afforded a view of the surrounding mountains. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the valley, painting the landscape in gold and deep purple. Afghanistan could be hauntingly beautiful, despite the violence that scarred its history. She took her grandfather's compass from her pocket, feeling its weight in her palm. The inscription caught the sunlight. True aim comes from the heart, not just the eye. I understand now, Grandpa. I finally understand. 6 months later, Emily Whitaker returned to Montana on leave, carrying experiences that had transformed her from a ranch girl with exceptional shooting skills into one of the most accomplished military marksmen in American history. Her record-breaking shot had been confirmed and documented in classified files, establishing new standards for long-range precision engagement that would influence special operations planning for decades to come. Standing on the familiar hills of her family's ranch, Emily reflected on the journey that had brought her from hunting prairie dogs to eliminating high-value targets in Afghanistan. The skills remained fundamentally the same, but their application had evolved far beyond anything she had imagined. You've changed, observed Sarah Jenkins, her childhood friend who was now studying engineering at the University of Montana. Not in bad ways, but you carry yourself differently. I've learned things about myself I never knew existed, Emily replied, watching the Montana sunset paint the mountains in familiar colors. Good things and challenging things. Her grandfather's Winchester .270 hung in its familiar place in the gun cabinet, waiting for her return to civilian hunting. But Emily knew that military service had given her purposes and capabilities that extended far beyond personal fulfillment. Webb and Martinez had both been promoted and assigned to specialized training programs where they would develop other soldiers with exceptional marksmanship potential. Emily's own future remained unwritten, with opportunities ranging from advanced military education to special operations assignments that would utilize her unique capabilities. What's next for you? Danny asked during a family dinner that felt both familiar and somehow different. More training, more missions, more opportunities to serve. That dare, Emily? But also more responsibility to use my skills for purposes that matter. Thomas Whitaker nodded approvingly. Your grandfather always said that exceptional ability creates exceptional responsibility. Sounds like you understand that now. After dinner, Emily walked alone to the old storage shed where she had first discovered her grandfather's secret history. The building looked smaller, somehow less mysterious than it had seemed before her deployment. She unlocked the padlock and stepped inside, breathing in the familiar musty scent of family history. The military footlocker remained where she had found it. Emily knelt beside it, running her fingers over the worn brass fittings. This time she wasn't searching for answers or revelations. She was honoring a legacy that had shaped her life in ways she was only beginning to understand. From her pocket she took a small object, the silver pin with the bow and arrow over a crosshair symbol that she had found during her first exploration of the trunk. She placed it inside, alongside her grandfather's journal and medals. One day, perhaps another Whitaker would discover these treasures and continue the family tradition of exceptional service. As Emily locked the shed behind her, she noticed an unfamiliar vehicle coming up the long driveway to the ranch house. A government sedan with tinted windows. She walked back to meet it, curious about this unexpected visitor. The car stopped, and an elderly man emerged with the careful movements of someone managing old injuries. He was perhaps in his 80s, his back straight. Despite his age, his eyes sharp beneath bushy white eyebrows. He wore civilian clothes, but Emily immediately recognized the bearing of a career military officer. "Specialist Whitaker," the man asked, extending his hand. "Colonel Hartman, U.S. Army retired. I served with your grandfather in a specialized capacity." Emily shook his hand, noting the strength still evident in his grip. "You were part of Artemis?" Hartman's eyebrows rose slightly. "You know about that, then?" "Yes, I was one of the original participants, along with Richard. We were part of something extraordinary, though few will ever know the full extent of it." "Why are you here, Colonel?" "To pay my respects, in a way, and to deliver something." From his pocket, Hartman withdrew a small box. "Your grandfather asked me to give you this, if you ever demonstrated the family talent." Emily accepted the box, opening it carefully. Inside lay a silver medal she didn't recognize. No official military decoration, but something custom-made. The design showed a bow and arrow, like the pin she had found, but with the addition of a laurel wreath surrounding it. Engraved on the back were the words, "For the shot others deemed impossible." He had this made after his mission in 1944, Hartman explained. He always believed someone in the family would follow his path. When I heard about a 4,800-meter shot in Afghanistan, I knew his faith had been justified. Emily looked up sharply. "That information is classified." Hartman smiled. "At my age and former rank, certain information finds its way to me, classified or not. Don't worry, the details remain secure, but those of us who share your particular abilities have ways of recognizing each other's achievements." "There are others, then?" "Still active?" "Always. The program continues under different names, different administrative structures, but the essence remains the same, identifying and developing individuals with extraordinary marksmanship potential." Hartman gestured toward the hills surrounding the ranch. "Richard always said these mountains were perfect training grounds. The variable winds, the changing light conditions, the extreme distances, nature's own sniper school." Emily nodded, understanding now why her grandfather had spent so many hours with her on these hillsides, teaching her to read the wind and calculate trajectories. He had been preparing her, whether consciously or not, for the path she would eventually follow. "What happens next?" she asked. "That's entirely up to you," Hartman replied. "You've proven yourself capable of achieving what others consider impossible. The military will continue to utilize your skills as long as you serve, but remember what Richard always said? Skill without purpose is just showing off," Emily finished. "But skill applied to something important can change the world." Hartman smiled. "Exactly. Your grandfather changed history with a single bullet in 44. You've done the same in Afghanistan. The question now is, what history will you write with the rest of your career?" As the old colonel departed, Emily stood on the porch of her family's ranch house, watching the Montana sunset paint the sky in brilliant orange and gold. The metal in her hand caught the fading light, a tangible connection to a legacy she was only beginning to understand. Her story would continue across multiple deployments and increasingly complex missions, but her foundation remained rooted in Montana values: hard work, family loyalty, and the understanding that skills without purpose are merely showing off. The 18-year-old who had left Montana to save her family's ranch had become a soldier whose capabilities would influence military doctrine for generations to come. But more importantly, she had become a person who understood that true excellence serves purposes larger than personal achievement. As Emily prepared to return to Afghanistan for her second deployment, she carried with her the confidence that comes from proven capability and the wisdom that comes from understanding the weight of that capability. The crosshairs that had once trembled against the horizon now held steady through challenges that would have been unimaginable to the ranch girl who first picked up her grandfather's rifle. But the heart that guided those crosshairs remained unchanged, determined, compassionate, and committed to protecting the people and principles she valued most. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey through Emily Whitaker's transformation from Montana ranch girl to legendary military sniper. This story represents hours of research, writing, and careful crafting to bring you a complete novel-length narrative that explores themes of duty, sacrifice, and the extraordinary potential that lies within determined individuals. If this story captivated you as much as it did me, I'd be incredibly grateful if you'd take a moment to hit that like button to help others discover this content. And of course, share this video with friends and family who appreciate detailed, engaging storytelling with authentic military elements. Subscribe to the channel for more epic novel-length stories like this one. Ring the notification bell so you never miss our latest releases. Your support means everything to creators like me who are passionate about bringing you high-quality, immersive storytelling experiences. Every like, share, and subscription helps us continue creating these detailed narratives that transport you to other worlds and introduce you to unforgettable characters. What did you think of Emily's journey? Drop a comment below and let me know your favorite moment from the story or suggest themes you'd like to see explored in future narratives. Did the technical aspects of long-range shooting interest you? Or was it the connection between generations and family legacy that resonated most? For those of you who served in the military, especially those with experience in specialized units, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the accuracy of the portrayal and any experiences you might want to share. Until our next adventure together, keep dreaming big and never underestimate the power of determination and skill applied to something that truly matters. Subscribe now, and I'll see you in the next